This is not an accurate representation of Transformers '07 Optimus Prime. I mean, obviously, because it looks like Prime is finally convicted for war crimes, what with the orange jumpsuit and all. But even ignoring the colors, this is a rough approximation of what we saw on screen. And that's okay. Something I've really come to appreciate recently is that, thanks to the general screen accuracy focus of Studio Series, toys that go off script can still be pretty rad. It's legitimately refreshing to be able to look at a figure like this without the social pressure of giving a shit care about accuracy. And tossing that aside makes it so much easier to appreciate this thing for what it actually is. Structurally, this guy is a bit weird. He has these big flat knee pads sitting over almost hoof-like feet. The arms seem maybe a little too thin compared to the thighs. The shins are pretty blocky from all angles. And the entire truck nose is crumpled up on his back. It's just right there. Even so, I can't help but really like the look of this figure. The backpack is definitely there. But it's almost endearing how little it hides the alt mode while still reducing the side profile a respectable amount. And it's kind of neat to store the guns on here, I don't know what to tell you. Also, the sculpting is great, even if it's practically all cheating with the faux parts. Like, yeah, the torso has no actual alt mode parts in it, but the detailing is very nice. And the way it sort of visually tricks the eye into seeing layered parts when it's actually a solid block is kind of amazing. Admittedly, I did specifically choose First Strike Prime over the regular version for a specific reason that I'll get into later, but you know what? Even though the colors and deco here are kind of weird, in hand they're also kind of great. Orange and blue always work well together, and while I think that using a darker blue for the torso and shoulders would have contrasted the orange better, and would match the darker blues of the head, hands, and knees much better, it's still fine. The silvery gray in the midsection and legs also works because, one, gray sort of goes with anything, and two, it's a nice shade that doesn't actually muddy any of the molded details. A little more painted detailing in the forearms and biceps also would have been nice so they aren't just stark orange with like a little bit of yellow. Incidentally, the yellow on this one seems like it probably could have used a second coat because it's just kind of fading into orange up top here. But that's easy enough to cover up by plugging the guns in. Guns that, yes, are kind of weird in how they peg over the wrist rather than into the hands. Just like that. But once they're in place, they look the part. I also like how the guns, which are formed by some of the truck mode, by the way, manage to look both like truck parts and rifles at the same time. Even if the barrel lengths, or are these supposed to be scopes, are so varied. They sure do fire those hidden missiles well, though. Wow, that went way off. We're okay. The head is maybe a tad puffy looking, but just like the torso, the sculpt work is really good. I love the use of silver and gold metallic paint for some of the detailing, and for as much as I prefer painted eyes over light piping, those eyes have a tendency to glow under even the most pathetic lighting conditions. And for this being an '07 movie toy, Articulation is surprisingly almost on par with what we take for granted these days. Aside from ankle tilts and a waist swivel, both of which are left out for what I'd consider obvious and understandable reasons, he's got it all. Full head rotation, 360 degrees at the shoulders, over 90 outward, not much, but it is over. Bicep swivels, 90-degree elbows, and he's even got ball-jointed wrists. Though you're not going to be using those much once you plug in his guns. The transformation joints in the shoulders can be used to approximate inward butterfly motion too, so I guess that's +1 over expected modern articulation. Like I said, there's no waist, but the hips go forward and back up to 90 in either direction. On a ratchet for some weird reason, which does prevent more subtle movements, but it also means he's never going to tip over. Hips can also go out to almost 90, but the hip wheels get in the way. And the sculpting does impede the thigh rotation from going all the way around, but you basically get up to 90 going to the outside or inside, so as far as I'm concerned, that's a non-issue. I also just think it's cool when they design thigh rotations to hide the joint like this. Knees bend ever so slightly past 90. The toe or heel or both can angle down, and that's it. I suppose you could arguably move the ankles forward and back, but that's really just wiggling from the automorph mechanism, which we will talk about later. Now, I legitimately can't remember what size class this figure is supposed to be in. I think maybe a Voyager? I know it's definitely not the '07 movie leader class mold. but in modern terms, it's roughly the same height as the current leader. He looks a little skinnier next to someone like Ultra Magnus, from the front anyway, and I can't say for sure that he's any heavier, but yeah, that's about how he stacks up. And speaking of stacks, oh, this? No reason. No reason at all. But there's always reason for the duck tank. Okay, so before we turn this into a truck and we get to the real reason why I got this figure, I've got a Ko-fi and a Patreon. Links to both are in the video description as well as at the end of the video, part of the end card, I guess you could call it. And with that all out of the way, let's transform this guy. And his transformation is really interesting. I mean, it does use faux parts as established before, but it is really cool. So to start, going to take the hood section here, bring it up. It's on this double hinge, just bring this up all the way, and that will kind of settle into place here. Take the head, and it's on this big plank, and the whole thing just flips around. Now I'm gonna just bring the arms out to get them out of the way, and what I like to do, I don't think this is strictly necessary, but I do like to rotate the hands around 180 degrees. And let's just finish prepping the arms. So these panels slide around to the other side, like so. Okay, not 180 degrees. Fold them like that. I was doing it wrong. So, like that. And back here you can see there is a little hinge. So this just slides out and down. And this will just sit like that for now. I'm going to rotate the thighs so that they're pretty much straight, get the knees straight, and I'm going to fold the arms forward, and they also unclip from up here. So we get these up and around, and eventually these are going to sit like this, so that this peg for the guns sits in this little divot on either side of the plank here. But before we can do that, we also want to disconnect this section here. And this whole thing swings up. And now these shoulder plate things here that the arms are attached to will sit underneath this out of the way. They sit kind of underneath here in like this little groove here. So bring this in and around, and that will, it basically keeps this armature from going back down. So now this can't go back down for the robot mode. And then I'm going to take the arms and plug them, not plug them in, but settle them in there. And you want to do this one first because you notice there's this little tab here. So bring this one down first and just get that into position. And then this one, there is a slot on this side. So this just comes down and slots over that tab while also having the peg kind of settle into that space. And this is why I rotate the hands, because it just, you know, the thumbs kind of go into those little cavities, and I feel like it gives the hands a little bit more room in this mode. I don't think it's necessary, but that's what I like to do. So now we've got that, and that is pretty much the entire front of the truck. The back part is really cool though. I really like how the legs work. So I'm going to take the feet and heels and just collapse them in together. And this is pretty wild. So the leg, the entire shin section unplugs from this blue piece just below the knee. It actually clips in. So this unclips, and then this entire assembly rotates down. And as this rotates down, we can take this piece and hinge it up. And you want to line this up so that there's this little tab here. You want that to go over this little spot here, but you also want this piece to go over this little tab in here. So it's a little bit weird, but it works. Anyway, with that done, we can now rotate the foot in, and when that happens, it sets off the automorph, which starts to fold this piece out. And you can also rotate this piece back, which will, it all kind of settles in like this. A lot's going on here, but basically the foot tucks in, which gets this panel in place. This panel kind of slides back because it's spring-loaded, and then this panel that was the knee will come down and tab over top of that and hold this whole thing together. And we'll show it from this angle now. So untab this, and get this thing situated, just because. Now this folds out. This can, okay, we'll show it from this angle. This one can hinge back, and this rotates back. And now we can do the foot. So we push the foot in, it pushes that little panel out, and it will go up. Oh, I think the mistake was, yeah, okay. You don't want to tab this in yet because it gets in the way. So push that up, and there we go. And now, no. I bought this figure new, or not new, I bought it, I mean, it is new, it was still in box, so like sealed in box, and it had those like rubberized ties, and because this figure is, you know, several years old, those rubberized ties were not in the best shape. A little piece just fell out. I guess I missed it. But anyway, you want to peg the legs together, they tab together here and down here. So tab that together. Oh, and here. There's a little tab here. So tab all this together, tab this together, and now this entire assembly swings around, and the primary thing that holds all this together, there are tabs here on the backs of the what are the cabs that tab in just behind the hips, but the primary thing holding it all together is the panels here come together to form this little T-tab, and that T-tab will slot into this space right up here. So you bring this around and then press it together, take the shoulder pads, fold them in, and then for the guns, these just plug in. There's a little peg here and a little slot here, peg hole, little tab that's like the fake handle for the robot mode handle, for your gun handle, whatever, goes in that slot. And you want the firing mechanism pointing inward. So put that in there, rotate this out and around. And then with this rotated, now you can start to rotate it in, rotate this piece about 90 degrees, and then rotate this in the rest of the way. And then this comes up, and that makes the smokestacks. That is super cool. I really like this weapon integration. Again, on this side, plug this in. So plug this in, swing it out just to get clearance, and bring it around. We'll rotate this, swing this in, swing this up. And there we have First Strike Optimus Prime's rather cool looking little, well, maybe not even little. That's the truck mode. Just like the figure itself, that transformation is not screen accurate. Also, just like the figure, that's not a bad thing in this case. It's weird and wrong, sure, but it's also fun and interesting. The way the legs flip around to form the back portion of the cab and cover up the legs from the top is inspired, and I love how it sort of claps down at the end. And what we're left with is the reason I wanted to get First Strike Prime specifically over all the other options out there. And there are a few. But first, this is just a really good looking truck. I have no idea how correct the proportions are, but they sure do look perfect to my layman eyes. The sculpted detailing isn't as intricate as a lot of the robot bits, sure, but this is a truck, so it's supposed to have more smooth surfaces. With plenty of rivets, texturing on the steps just below the doors, and so on. The way the guns disappear into the truck mode is also really cool. I feel like if you didn't know better, you'd have no idea. Maybe you could tell that these bits transform in some capacity, but there's nothing about how these are attached that lets you know they're actually accessories, and I love them for that. As a sort of bonus, due to the way the figure transforms, the entire nose section of the truck is completely untouched by transformation seams. This isn't a particularly important detail to me personally, but I can appreciate it. And I appreciate the fact that the painted headlights and Autobot badge stick out really nicely on that solid gray grille. Now for the probably obvious explanation as to why I wanted this figure for this truck mode in these colors. For sure I'm not the only person who noticed this. I saw at least a couple of TFW threads on the subject after I got a hold of this thing myself. But this truck is basically GoBot Stax. It's not a one-to-one perfect representation of Stax vehicle mode, no, but this is a similar kind of cab, long-nosed I guess, and it's in very similar colors. To the point where I honestly wish there was a way to give him more of a Stax-style robot mode via fan mode rather than a bunch of plastic cutting modifications. The latter thing is possible, and I've seen photos, and it looks great, but I'm just not prepared to do that to this figure yet. And this is where the orange makes way more sense. As a truck, it's a nice shade and works well with the dark blue, especially now that the light blue is all hidden away. And I also dig the silver stripe going all the way along the sides, which I feel like is supposed to be a nod to other Optimus decos, but it also calls to mind the yellow stripes on stacks. Just, in silver. Additionally, I love how the lights along the top of the cab have all been painted, and the silver that's been used for all the wheel rims. Even the translucent blue for the windows pleases me. Mostly because it's mostly a separate piece that doesn't move at all for the transformation, and is small enough that the slightly mismatched paint doesn't stand out, but also because the slightly blue tint just looks good with the orange, as this color combination always does. I do also get a kick out of the fake driver gimmick, of course. Pop open the driver's side door, and the tiny gray cowboy inside pretty much vanishes. Then close the door, and oh look, he's back. Upon even closer inspection, there's even a bit of sculpted interior, with 2 seats and the vaguest hint of a dashboard. That's neat. This is all completely ignorable since it has no bearing on the robot mode, aside from the transformation engineering, I think, but it's a fun little gimmick that doesn't get in the way of anything else. It's just, boop, driver's gone, and boop, robots pretending they're being driven by humans. Specifically a cowboy for some reason. Now, I did forget to script a bit about the, attack mode or battle mode or whatever, so I'm just going to talk about it now. As you saw during the transformation, specifically going from robot back to truck, you can actually flip the guns out. If you just fold this down, rotate this out just so that you get the clearance, and then fold this forward, then this whole thing rotates up and back around, and then you do the same thing to this side. Just pull it out, pull it out. I need to kind of tighten some of these joints too. They're a little bit annoyingly loose, but you do that, and there you have the attack mode or battle mode or whatever it is. And this is silly, to be sure, but I also really like it because, yeah, it's goofy and a little bit weird that he's got these gigantic gasoline tank guns poking out of the front of the truck mode like this, but it's also very Mask-ish. If anyone watching this remembers that line, I feel like enough people mention Mask offhand in other videos that they probably do, but it's very Mask-ish, and also, again, it's incorporated with the vehicle mode, so this just feels fun to do, I guess? I don't know, I really like how these hide completely in truck mode, and then when you bring them out, it looks silly but also kind of cool and works as an attack mode, but it also doesn't get in the way of anything because it's also how you store the guns in the robot mode. And if you take them off for the robot mode, these panels fold up along the back and it's like it's nothing. It's a very cleverly designed approach to something like this. And again, I love how easy it is to transform these, flip things around, and then suddenly they're just gone. It's just no more battle mode. Now it's just truck. I really like that. And this is a sizable truck, too. Bigger than a modern Deluxe or Voyager, maybe roughly liter-sized, just like the robot mode. But it's an orange long-nosed truck cab, so it makes me happy. Because stacks. And again, putting these two next to each other, it's pretty obvious that there are differences in the shape, proportions, and the minutiae of the design. Still though, I can't help but believe that this Optimus deco was intended to be some kind of stealth, or maybe even not so stealth, homage to a specific Super GoBots figure I have a pretty intense fondness for since, I think the mid-80s, maybe 90s? That's what I choose to believe anyway. I want to think this is some kind of stealth stacks homage. What's funny to me is I originally wanted to get the 07 toy because I thought it looked neat and fun, but when I saw this version I became obsessed because stacks. But then I got the figure and for sure stacks, but also it really is just a neat toy that's a lot of fun to mess with. The truck looks good for what it is, I say that as someone who's not really into alt modes, and the attack mode is easy to pull off and fun in its own way. The transformation is kind of wild, but also clever and entertaining, and I just like transforming this thing for no reason sometimes. And the robot mode, while a bit wonky looking, is full of neat detailing and poses so much better than I expected for a figure released around 2007, 2008. Then again, I think classics and universe were a thing at that point, so maybe I'm just biased. I don't know. I missed out on a lot of Transformers toys between like 2000 and 2014, 2015. I've got gaps. This is kind of the best approximation I can do. At this point, I'm going nowhere, so I'll just close on saying that if this mold interests you at all, in any of the available colors, definitely try to get a hold of a version of it. There are several versions out there, and some of them sell for a fairly reasonable price. Heck, I got this guy new in box for $45 before shipping and tax. So I'll say find your favorite deco and go for it. Anyway, what do you all think of this mold? Whatever your thoughts, feel free to chime in down below. I always enjoy hearing from you all. Thank you all for watching, and I will be talking at you about toys in the next video.